Hello, everyone, and welcome to twitch.tv/the Onyx Path, where today we are getting together for a Storypath Nexus writing session. I did one of these last week for um, Trinity Continuum Aberrant, and that book is actually now out. It's called Night Watch's Nemesis. I'm just bringing it up right now. I'm going to throw you the link in the chat in case you want to go check that out. Nightwatch Nemesis is a collection of story guide characters for Trinity Continuum Aberrant. It ties in with the Edgebrook Rooftops Tasty Bit that came out a few weeks back that I actually had the opportunity to work on as well. I'm very proud of that. I would highly recommend you head over and check that out if you've not yet done so. Um, And then, speaking of things that are in the Trinity Continuum and that you should run over and check out right away, the Trinity Continuum Assassins VTT adventure, Rat in a Burning Cage, has just come out this week. It's super cool. It's a expanded and extended adventure. It's got playable characters, complete with sheets, a 3-act story. Maps with grids and without grids. There's an incidental sound and music package, printable handouts, all sorts of stuff. Very, very cool. The complete Assassin's token set for virtual tabletops. It's a really awesome collection that I highly recommend you pick up, and it's pretty affordable too. So I'm going to go ahead and throw a link to that in here as well. So go over and check that out, the Rat in a Burning Cage. So now that I've gotten that stuff out of the way, I just wanted to, I guess, break down kind of what we're doing here. In case this is the first time you've tuned into one of these, that's going to kind of be a ride along. I'm going to be working on a supplement. This time I've chosen Trinity Continuum and using the Storypath Nexus community content program. So what that lets you do effectively is you can create your own Storypath releases, as long as you fall within the guidelines and rules that the community has created, or that Onyx Path has dictated for the community. And then you can release those commercially. So you can basically make some money. One thing I always recommend to people, if you're running a game, and it has a community content program, if you're making notes, if you're creating NPCs, if you're doing anything along those lines, community content's a great way to get your stuff out there, get some feedback from the public on your design process, but also, monetize your the work that you're already doing. It's only a few more steps to get it together for community content. So I'm going to go ahead and throw the Nexus community guidelines here in the chat. And those cover basically everything you need to know about the Storypath Nexus. It's pretty straightforward and simple, and they offer layout templates both in InDesign and just in Microsoft Word, as well as art assets for the lines that are open. So if you're worried about, I have stuff, but I don't have art for it, you can get free art when you go to the Storypath Nexus. Otherwise, you can also pick up stock art on DriveThruRPG. The art is an important thing to me in my creative process, but I know it's not important to everybody. There's no reason that you, aside from putting together a cover, you don't necessarily need art in your project. It obviously, the more you have, the more it looks like a professional release, the easier it is to, sell to people. But if you make good content, I firmly believe that good content will be used. And also, if you check out the Discord, there's a Storypath Nexus chat channel on there. And you might be able to find somebody else to work alongside. Maybe you are really good at writing but don't know so much about layout, but you can find someone who knows how to do the layout and isn't so hot with writing. Or maybe somebody who knows how to edit but doesn't really want to make their own stuff. So it's a nice place to look for collaboration. So before we dive into this, or I guess now that we're done with that, let's dive into it. The book that I'm working on this time, I've done a little bit of prep before hopping on here because I didn't think that everybody wanted to sit through me sort of scratching my head and figuring out the basics of what I wanted to do. So the title I've gone with is Assault on Nemesis Station. And the idea behind Assault on Nemesis Station is we're going to set it in the asteroid belt. On an asteroid called Nemesis. Since I decided the asteroid belt would be a good setting, I wanted to basically find something that we would have some opportunity. We have some wiggle room. I like playing in the cracks of a setting when I'm making something for Storypath Nexus or for any community content, rather than putting out something that's right adjacent with some of the main themes. I like to look for blank spots in the narrative and try to plug those in with interesting content. So in mission statements, I believe it was, there was discussion of the Ice Mining Corporation. And that struck me as being a interesting and fun jump off point. So the International Consortium of Eco Mining. If you're not familiar at all with Trinity Continuum Aeon, it is a science fiction setting in about 150 years in the future, give or take. Guess closer to 200 now in the new edition, but. Yeah, it's futuristic sci-fi. There has been some tragedies and calamities have befallen humanity, but they've risen from the ashes and started sort of spreading throughout the galaxy thanks to psionics. It's a very, very, very bird's eye view of it, but that's the basics. The International Consortium of Eco Mining is a meta corporation that focuses on water mining primarily, but have expanded into mining of other precious items. They do a lot of their mining in the asteroid belt because there are a lot of rocks out there that are mineral rich and they have a lot of frozen water on them. So there's a lot of focus on that region of space for the ICE or ICE. So I thought that made kind of a cool backdrop. I had some stock art that I picked up on drive-through that focus on some clearly extra terrestrial colony places. They're very moon-like, but not necessarily Earth's moon. So I thought, hey, this would be very cool. We could put it on, we set something up in the asteroid belt. I did a little bit of research. There's an asteroid called Nemesis that looked like it would be a good candidate for this kind of a thing. So that's where we're going to set it. And that's really kind of how I came to that conclusion. I just sort of, pulled it together. I have somebody in chat pointing out that Aeon is like Mass Effect, except there aren't any sexy blue aliens. There may or may not be evil machine intelligence, though. That is all accurate. And I don't know that they've ever been physically described in Aeon, but I've always imagined the Doyen as blue aliens, though not quite sexy. The thing that that made me kind of come to that conclusion was right around shortly after I started really getting into Trinity, I think, though I'm an old man now and my memory is all one big sludge of days. There was a film that came out called Titan AE, cartoon, and there were these energy aliens in it that were kind of hunting down humanity called the Dredge, and I immediately connected those two in my mind. So to me, in my mind, the Doyen looked like the Dredge from Titan AE. How's it going, Blink? Thank you and welcome for joining us. We're just sort of getting into it. So our setting, I've decided that a cool title would be Assault on Nemesis Station. partially because I just watched Assault on Precinct 13 the other day, so it was fresh in my mind. I believe you'll start to see if you hang out in enough of these that everything is triggered by outside references for me. I make a lot of things that are like, oh, this sounds cool, so I'm going to rework it and build it off of this. I don't so much have ideas as I catch them as they pass me by. So, a couple things I want to focus on with Assault on Nemesis Station. We're going to put these in these handy dandy bullet points. I'm not sure if you can actually see the text on here or not. My eyes aren't great, so sometimes it's not easy for me to tell exactly how it's looking on the stream. But we have the interface for InDesign here. I make my community content in InDesign largely so that I can keep an eye on like how much space I'm actually using, where do I need to put art, so on and so forth. It does have a spell checker, but it's not great. If you do decide to do this, I would recommend exporting out all your text, putting it into Word and running your spell check on Word, and then putting it back in. But I also understand people don't always do that. So we're going to use these bullet points that are in this handy dandy prefabricated template for us. We're going to see what do we want to cover with Assault on Nemesis Station. It's going to be an adventure, and we want it to be in a limited scope play. With potential for follow-ups. And what I mean by that is effectively this is a story that's going to have a beginning, middle, and end. It's going to be relatively self-contained in scope. We're not going to write any sort of big, massive kind of sprawling epic. You can do those on community content. I recommend if you intend to do so that you start small, make your first, do it in chapters, do like each adventure as its own release. Because one thing that makes each of them a more digestible chunk to get out of your computer and out into the hands of others. You can get more agile feedback because you can find out how people are using it and see if you need to make course corrections throughout the course of it. And it also doesn't feel like an insurmountable task, especially if you're not doing this stuff full time. Getting out a big book can be daunting. So one of the ways that I would recommend to people who are new to it, or even if you've been at it for a while, is try to keep things as bite-sized and small as possible and as self-contained as possible. It will absolutely make your life easier. And thank you for verifying the legibility for me. I greatly appreciate it. So, we want to get an adventure of limited scope play with potential follow-ups. What's the other things that we want to cover in here? One of the things, we both have our official Discord and there's also a fan Discord, and I hang around on both of them talking about Trinity a lot because it is probably my favorite Storypath setting. So one of the things we've been talking about a lot is how some of us, myself included, want to see a little bit more horror in the aberrant element of Trinity. The aberrants are now effectively alien, though they have human origin, and basically mutated through the corruption of their quantum power. To my mind, they're at their coolest when used in Aeon as like just a purely horrific antagonist. They don't necessarily have to be, and there's a lot of ways to use them, but I really like, if you imagine the film Alien or like even Event Horizon or something along those lines as being aberrant created. Maybe the xenomorph is an aberrant, or the situation in Event Horizon is due to aberrant mental meddling and things along those lines. I think that would be really cool, and I think those are the kinds of ways I like to focus. So we want to have horror elements and ratchet up the terror. of aberrants. So obviously, some of our plot aspects are going to deal with aberrants in the setting. There are a million stories you can tell in Aeon and never once touch on aberrants, but they make for a good villain, and it was germane to kind of some of the things we were discussing in the group. Also, they're nice antagonists for the location that we've set it in. In the background of the setting, there was a time when the Aberrants left Earth was due to basically an ultimatum that if they didn't leave, the humans were going to just scorch the planet with nukes. So the Aberrants took off and went into space. Many of them retreated into the asteroid belt. So while a lot of the aberrants were completely gone from the solar system for a period of time, some have been sort of hiding in the asteroid belt this entire time. And so I think the idea of a mining consortium showing up to a place where there's already an aberrant presence, but those aberrants, instead of just like, wasting them the minute they get there, kind of hang back and say, okay, well, what's up? Let's see what these humans are doing and see what we can gain from it. I think that lends kind of well to some horror stuff. And as I'm thinking about the way I want to put together, also some influences of The Thing are sort of coming to mind. Welcome, Simulacra. I'm glad to hear that you are here for Scary Aberrants. We will make that happen. And Blink, I got to tell you, if you're looking at writing RPG content, I cannot stress enough how good of an avenue I think community content is for that. Partially because it's easy to do these small things that cut your teeth on them, build up your skill, build up your reputation with them, but also, if you do something that's really good and you put out a couple things that are really good and they're consistently good, people will notice you, and that could lead to other opportunities as well. So I really, that's literally how I wound up where I'm at, is through my community content work. Ultimately built me up a reputation, and that built me up the opportunities. So please do dive into it. It's a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to focus on that horror here. So let's see where we're at. We've got limited scope play with potential for follow-ups. We have horror elements. Ratchet up the terror of aberrants. It helps if I spell ratchet properly. You will see typos and mathematical errors and all those things. Feel free to point them out as you see them. I will do my best to address them in the moment, but if I'm in the heat of something, I might blow past it and note it for later. I promise all this stuff will get a nice editing pass before it goes up in public too. So the other thing I want to do is I want to focus on the 3 areas of action. And what I mean by that is Trinity Continuum, Aeon, Aberrant, Aether, Adventure, they all run on the engine that's established in the Trinity Continuum core book. Trinity Continuum core book is covers all your bases, and it explains basically the 3 areas of action used in the Storypath system. You have your procedurals, so you're looking at like investigation, things along those lines. I'm just looking up to make sure I don't botch the terminology here. And as you can tell, if you're looking very closely, my eyes have started to go to pot, so now I have bifocals that I have to adjust to read out of a book. The joys of aging. So you have action, adventure, procedurals, and intrigue. So procedurals are like your investigation stuff. Intrigue is social interaction, and then action adventure obviously is breaking into things and punching folks in the face. Let's see. Something, the ice being mined in the aberrant's body. Ooh, that could be cool. The ice is the aberrant's body, or the ice is somehow connected to it. The aberrant is somehow connected to the environment. That's cool. Let's put that in our back pocket. And if we don't use it, you should absolutely use it in another write-up, because it's a big asteroid belt. There's room for a lot of ideas. Okay, so we want to cover the 3 areas of action. adventure. And one of the reasons I think that this is important to cover all three of the areas of action in the adventure is we can make it self-contained then and show off the entire system. So you're getting a story that's self-contained, beginning, middle, and end. It shows off kind of everything in gross that the system is designed to do, and by gross I mean like a overview of what the system is designed to do, and it also lends itself well to a nice 3-act structure. Now you can repeat those steps, right? You can have scenes, if you want to have multiple scenes, you could have all three areas of action in one act of a story, and then do it again in the second act, do it again in the third act. And really, not to get too far into the weeds about writer's theory because it's not terribly important, but I find it best when writing adventures to kind of use like a 5-act structure, more like episodic TV does, where so you have basically your pre-credit sequence, the cold open, the thing that gets you into the story. Then you have your 3 acts throughout the episode, and then you end on a denouement that just sort of takes you out. There could be a giant metal spider in the third act. I'll get to giant metal spiders at some point here, but as I've mentioned before, I tend to work, especially when I'm creating antagonists and such, art first and then work my way backward. So one of these pieces of art that I have kind of put in here as a placeholder is definitely, you can't see it because it's kind of zoomed up close, but this little guy is definitely got a spidery body. So not metal, but spidery body. But having said that, though, I've also used that piece of art in another project, so I'll probably swap it out for something else. But don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. So we have 4 elements. We have the 3 areas of action. We're going to do our 5-act or 5-scene structure. And it's kind of similar to like, you've heard of like 5-room dungeons and things like that. That's a trope or an element that keeps getting repeated because it works. Just having 5 beats is a good goal for a single session sit down. Let's see, setting it in the asteroid belt can set up some inspiration from the Expanse. That would be cool. I have precisely 0 exposure to the Expanse. It's one of the things that I do need to check out. I was just having a conversation with this with a friend of mine about this today. I think now in my 4th decade, I've finally accepted that I am a Trekkie first and everything else second when it comes to to science fiction fantasy. I've struggled for a long time with my pseudo fandom for Star Wars, but at the end of the day, I just don't like it that much. My favorite Star Wars film is The Last Jedi, if that tells you anything. I don't march in lockstep with that particular property. It just doesn't trip my triggers. I've heard good things about the Expanse. I've heard good things about Andromeda, and I've watched some Battlestar, but certainly not all of it. But having said that, I will check it out for fodder. And it seems like, based on some of the ideas that you were mentioning in the chat there, Scott, Simulacra TV, some of those elements are cool. I like the idea of having something involving aberrant cultists. In fact, is going back to the art that I sort of picked as I was pulling together stock art for this, I grabbed these 2 images up top of this page here because they screamed aberrant cult to me. So before we get into filling in too many of those traits, we've got our basic bases covered, right? If it doesn't look like we do, somebody shout at me in chat and tell me what you think we're missing. But we have the adventure of limited scope with potential for follow-ups, horror elements, ratcheting up the terror of the aberrants, cover the 3 areas of action in the adventure, and a 5-scene structure. Okay, so armed with that, I think we can sort of rough out what this adventure is going to be, right? So we're going to break this up into, I'm going to use paragraph style 2 there, and this is going to be scene 1. And then we're going to throw in, sometimes when I'm creating this stuff, I like to just kind of throw in little like punctuation markers to remind myself more than anything else. So I'm putting a little semicolon or a little colon at the end of that so that I remember to title these scenes, because it's the kind of thing that one might forget when they get into the heat of the moment. All right, so right now I'm just going in and pasting in my 5 scenes. There we go. So now we have broken down that we have 5 scenes. I think I mentioned earlier a little bit of inspiration from The Thing. I think one good way that we can dive into this is let's set up a situation where the characters maybe feel safe and comfortable at first, and then we immediately rip the rug out from underneath them. So for our first scene, let's call it. Let's focus on getting the characters to Nemesis. So we want them to go to the station. Let's say they're being sent from elsewhere. The default will assume that they're being sent from elsewhere. Now, one of the cool things about Anne being such a rich setting is we could then create just a list of bullet points of where might the characters come from. This is something that they can sort of decide as they're doing session 0. Or if the story guide wants to hand out some ready-made characters or something along those lines, we can do that, right? So we're gonna come up with a couple of different assumptions of where they might have come from. So I'm just gonna mark these off in bullets, real simple, so that I don't lose track of them. So let's say one of the obvious and easy answers in Anne is there's a allegiance that the players can join called the Aeon Trinity, and they're sort of a extra governmental body that works with the United Nations. They handle sort of coordinating the psi orders, coordinating security for Earth's settled space. They handle things like research and development, including sort of determining what technology is and is not safe for science to pursue. So we could say that they might send a team out for an inspection, right? So we're going to say Anne team for a tech inspection. That's a pretty simple, straightforward way of introducing this group and giving them a reason to go there. It makes a good default. I think another option would be, if we want to get away from Anne, there are different psi orders, each of which might have a stake in the business on the asteroid belt. Most likely, probably, I would assume Architect, the Legions, and maybe Norsa. But any psi order might have reasons to be out there. So we can break it down by psi order. Citing the motivations for being in the asteroid belt. And that might even be like, that's another thing where we can kind of play with the structure a little bit, right? So members of the psi orders can be part of that and team. Okay, so you can either treat these as two separate approaches for coming in, or you can also just say, we can put a little sidebar in where we can also say, these are the psi orders motivations for their interest in the area. If they are part of another, if members of a psi order are part of another sort of origin to the story, these motivations could also apply as like a secondary plan or a B plot, right? Does that make sense? There is always the classic of just passing through. But if they're just passing through, I like just passing through, don't get me wrong. But I like passing through and something goes wrong even better. So something unrelated goes wrong. I want to make that clear in my notes here because I'm going to go back and actually flesh these out later. But so, for example, they're flying through, coming from, say, an outpost on, Neptune. And they come blazing back through, headed on their way to Earth. They have some sort of a technical malfunction on their ship, and they need to land in a hurry. So they're aware that Nemesis Station is there. It's the easiest place for them to land. But for some reason, Nemesis Station isn't answering their hails. So now they have to land and they have to figure out what's going on, what's wrong. That's cool. I like that. I like that a lot. And let's see, we could also have, so we don't spend all day figuring out ways they could get in here. We could have actual ICE employees, right? This is a company, and companies hire people, and companies also hire scions. The default assumption in AN is that you're all playing scions, but you can also play talents as presented in the Trinity Continuum core rules. You can play certain aliens. Maybe you're a Chin diplomat who's checking out the technology there. There's various different ways that you can tie in other character types. So you don't necessarily need to be scions, though we do want to spend a little bit of time kind of calling out like a specific why the scions might be interested. Why is it called Nemesis Station? Because the name of the asteroid that it's on is Nemesis. And that's just because I did a little Googling and I looked at kind of the bigger bodies in the asteroid belt and looked for one that was not already named in the lore, but had a significant composition that it would make sense for there to be a mining station there. And also the name Nemesis is just cool, right? So yeah, that's why it's called Nemesis Station. And then, so we got ice in place. And one other thing that is present in the Trinity setting, the AN setting specifically, is space pirates. And you really can't go wrong with space pirates. I think that's a great idea, no matter how you slice it. So perhaps the player characters are space pirates and they're there for, coming down for a raid, right? You're like, we're going to go raid Nemesis Station because they seem to be cut off from communications for some reason. This might be a good time to try to steal something. Or, you could be attacked by space pirates and that's why you need to land. So we have these nice sort of bullet point ideas that we can sort of then spin out into their own sort of paragraphs that then the story guide can pick, like, oh, this is the hook I want to use, this is the hook I want to use, and put their game together based on that. So basically all we've done here in scene one is break out these hooks, and what we want to do is we want to explain the hooks and introduce the characters. That's really it. That's really the point of the first scene, right? All we need to do, thanks for asking. That was a good question, Link. I appreciate you asking. So the only thing scene one has to do in order to fulfill its function in the story is explain the scenario, introduce the characters, right? And it doesn't even have to explain the whole scenario. It just has to explain the scenario as the characters understand it in scene one. So there's a lot of wiggle room. But I kind of fell in love with the idea, especially because we want to cover the 3 areas of action, right? I kind of fell in love with the idea that scene 2 is arrival, right? And so the characters arrive at Nemesis Station. And the place is a wreck. We can get into an investigation scene here. Why is it a wreck? There are areas that are going to be, some areas have atmo breach. So effectively they're unable to be explored or investigated without using like a spacesuit. The place should be kind of initially at least appear to be deserted. And players have to investigate to figure out what happened. Okay. So now we know exactly what we have to achieve with scene 2, right? And as we get into kind of like what is the components of each of those scenes, we can explore a little bit about like how clues work, for example. A lot of the procedural aspect of Trinity Continuum functions on clues and the collection and analysis and extrapolation of information from those clues. So we'll determine a couple things that are going to be what's called core clues. Those are things that no matter what, the characters must discover for the plot to move forward. And Trinity provides those so that even if the dice hate your players that day, they're going to get the bare minimum of information that will get them to the next scene. They might be poorly equipped for the next scene. They might walk in with all sorts of misunderstandings in the next scene, but it'll get them to that next scene, right? So again, it's kind of in Trinity, one of the sort of conceits of the system is that you fail forward. Anytime you're failing things, it's still moving the plot forward because you're still a hero and you're still incredibly competent. So that is kind of some of the reasoning behind those core clues. But we'll fill all that in as we come back through and sort of flesh out the scene. We need to discuss briefly what happened, right? What do they discover? My thinking, and actually this I think ties in pretty well kind of with one of the suggestions made earlier about the water that they're mining being like a part of the aberrant. And I like that idea. I like the idea that their mining is doing more than just inconveniencing the aberrant or piquing its curiosity. I like the idea that it's messing their day up. So I think that what happened to the base should be an aberrant attack has happened just before they arrived. And I think that the clues should point to the fact, perhaps, that, through some investigation, maybe they discover that some of the people on the station may have been in contact with some other entity on the rock. So we have kind of a situation where let's see. So either something on the asteroid or on an adjacent asteroid, I think would be cool, like a nearby asteroid. And this comes back to the plucking things from the aberrant, right? My thinking is maybe, as I mentioned before, when the ultimatum hit, aberrants broke out, took off. And some of them hid in the asteroid belt. So what if, and some of them took their followers with them. At the time that the aberrant war happened on Earth, there were a lot of people who were part of aberrant cults or who just followed them, as spiritual or political leaders. So what if, let's say, a group of novas or a nova took off, headed for the asteroid belt, took all their followers with them, hollowed out a chunk of the asteroid that they landed on. Maybe it was Nemesis, maybe it was something near Nemesis, and they've had a society there ever since. That society would include the cultists, the sort of offspring of the humans who came along. Given that much time and that much exposure to the corruption that the aberrants are undoubtedly filling the place with, that would probably cause some mutations. So we can get into some of that stuff, which is fun. I love me some sub-aberrant mutants. And they've had this sort of functional place, and then Ice shows up and literally sticks their nose in this aberrant cult's business, and so they retaliate. Let's see. What do we got here? Just yeah, everything was going fine until we pulled in that new asteroid from mining. That's cool. That's super cool. I'm gonna copy that literal line and pop it in right here, just so I don't forget, because that is very neat. I like it. I like that feel. So that's going right in here, putting that in the back pocket so we don't lose it. Hold on, let me clean up my mess here. And I'm going to get rid of that illustration because I know A, I've got another one to pull from later, and B, we need some room so we can see what we're doing. So we've got scene one pretty well handled, right? Or scene two, I should say, pretty well handled. They show up, places a wreck, look into it, connect the dots to they connect the dots to aberrant activity or attack. I think maybe we should do our best to keep the actual cult for a later reveal, right? Because I think the idea that there are humans that are out there serving these terrifying alien things willingly, I think that's an opportunity to ratchet up the horror later when it's revealed. I think it takes away from the punch of it, or can take away from the punch of it, if they find out right away that there were like aberrant cultists up there, right? Though I'm open to arguments otherwise, I think let's save the cultists for later. So, where do we go from scene two? What do we want to cover from scene two? There are some things that they might want to do at this stage, right? They want to, they want to obviously figure out what's going on. The players are probably going to want to reach out to people for backup. So we got to figure out kind of how to address that. Now, we discussed earlier, though nothing's set in stone about this, we did discuss earlier that there were some difficulties with communications, right? So we'll say communications are down. and backup is difficult to reach. Doesn't mean it's impossible, and no good plan survives contact with players. So it's entirely possible that you'll be running this adventure, and you have this neat little scrap planned, and they look at it and they go, "Oh shit, it's aberrants. Our teleporter over here is going to go back to Earth and get a whole bunch of people with big guns. And we're going to come back and sort it out." Cool, roll with those punches. There's no reason not to. The setting is robust, and the story should be able to withstand that. So even if we're going to make a point that the comms are down and that that there's difficulty in reaching that backup, and we'll explain some of the challenges with that as we flesh out the story, but we're not cutting that avenue off. And I think scene 3 should fold into maybe some. I think once they've done the investigation, scene 3, let's get into some action adventure, right? So scene 3 is going to be about getting to the what's the word I want to find? Hideout, nest, the nest of the aberrants. Throw a pack of ninjas at the players. Sure, I mean that's one thing we could do. But no, we'll say scene 3 is getting to the nest, and to and through the nest. So the players will follow trail to the aberrant nest, overcoming natural and aberrant made obstacles, pitfalls. Upon arrival, they must contend with the security force. So we'll say the aberrants have some sort of settlement, right? Whether that be in a nearby asteroid that was pulled in, or in the core of Nemesis itself. The aberrants have some sort of a settlement, right? Scene 2 is about getting to that settlement and facing whatever obstacles keep the players out. So we'll throw them up against some just general traps will be in there, some navigational challenges, and then maybe we'll have a couple of basically aberrant guards, aberrant standing guard that will provide a physical challenge. So we can kind of cover all that action and adventure all within that scene. So this scene is going to end one of probably like 3 ways, basically, right? You're looking at either the players succeed, make it through all of the obstacles, beat their way past the aberrant security, and are now in the settlement. Option 2, they fail. They get taken out, whether it be by the environment or by the aberrant guards. They're taken out. In which case, the aberrants then take them inside to question them or to discuss with them, and they can wake up inside the settlement and bring us to our next scene. And then the third option, of course, being that they abandon the entire place and just go off and get help elsewhere. It's possible they might do that. They might decide this is too big for us and we can't handle it ourselves. And they come back with a larger force that all still has to contend with this thing and ultimately goes down one of those 2 paths. Hey, Wanderer's Haven, what's up, Jeremy? It's good to see you. Thank you for joining us. So scene 3 is basically about getting there and contending with the obstacles beforehand. Gives us a good chance to show off the action adventure sequences, the battle options, have a little fight in there. I think our aberrant security force out front should be consisting of like there are kind of 4 templates of aberrants. They're basically presented in Trinity and. So let me bring those up right quick. You have subaberrant mutants, which are basically humans who have been exposed to corruption and given mutated powers because of it. Divergents, which are sort of the lowest true aberrants. Nemesis and Terrat are the sort of ranks of it. I think that our security force should probably be, we'll say they're going to be divergent. They're there more as a lookout than anything. They're not expecting, these aberrants have lived out in this secret colony for generations at this point. So they're not expecting a whole lot of trouble to show up. It makes sense that they'd kind of put their, they're not going to put their strongest, most potent, most likely busy people on guard duty. So I'll have a couple divergent aberrants. Maybe we'll have equal to the number of players minus 1. Now let's just go straight number of players. Keep it even keel. However many players you have in the group, there's that many divergent aberrants. We'll draw those up in a bit. So they might be able to fight past them. It might go bad for them either way. Or they might retreat and go get help. Either way, it ultimately ends up in them with them in scene 4. And scene 4 is going to primarily be an intrigue scene as they get inside and wind up contending with the aberrant cult, basically, right? So the players discover players discover that the settlement is there, the cult is there. The cult explains their history. And explains their attack as a means of preserving resources. Or just protecting their home, right? Now, there's some things that I want to be careful about as we're going back through. I don't want to lose the horror element. So, in the interest of preserving that, I don't want to make these cultists too sympathetic. So that's something that I think I want to be mindful for. It's tempting to go down the route of like everybody's reasonable and we can always talk our way out of things. And I think that would be a disservice to a horror story. So at the end of the day, we'll say, but we want to know their motivations and their understanding, right? So we'll say we are going to make this an intrigue scene, or at least it's going to start as one. And anytime you're doing an intrigue scene, you have 2 things that are very important to that scene called attitude, which is the attitudes of the various parties involved, an atmosphere, which is kind of the overall feeling of it, right? So naturally, neither one of the scenarios that we discussed previously about them getting their sorry, I got derailed by these cultists are definitely evil. All they do is smell and help people. Who does that? Yeah, exactly. No, we want them to be a definite force for them to rub up against. Now, no matter how the players have arrived in this scene, right? If they fought their way through the guards and they walk in, that's going to create one atmosphere. If they are dragged in unconscious and thrown before this council of cultists, it's gonna be a different atmosphere. So we have to customize those, offer options based on how the players arrived. Now the players are going to have two goals. I should say the players will likely have two goals. You never know what a player is going to want to do. They're going to want to find out as much as they can and get themselves and any ice workers who survived out safely. Those are really going to be kind of like the two main things they're going to want, right? I think we should probably establish relatively early that while neither of those goals is going to be, well, they'll be able to find out plenty, but they're not going to be able to get them out safely without a fight or without something, at least without opposition, I should say, right? So they're going to want to come up with an escape plan. I also think this is an important place to put a reminder sidebar about aspirations. Aspirations are one of the methods by which people gain XP in Storypath and in Trinity in particular. A scene like this is a good chance to offer a reminder of like, what are your character's aspirations? You know, make sure you're trying to gear the narrative toward fulfilling those. You know, aspirations can be in or out of character, but they are ultimately a tool to help guide the entire party, not just the character, toward what kind of story you want to tell. So this might be a place where if somebody has a short-term aspiration of, you know, saving someone from a cult, they're going to play very differently in this scene than someone who has a short-term aspiration of kill a cultist, right? You know, things along those lines. So you want to bear those in mind. One of the other reasons why I think this might be a good place to put in a reminder about that is because this is a scene that, while it ultimately finishes our trifecta, right, it brings us to the procedure or to the intrigue that was missing earlier. It's probably going to end in a another action adventure scene, right, or sequence. They're going to go through, follow through the intrigue to its ultimate conclusion, but it's likely going to end in some sort of combat or chase, right? Sorry, I just getting a little bit my words on the page before I forget to. So yeah, so I think basically we're going to have, you know, they're going to go through, they're going to try to find out as much as they can about the cultists, then determine how they need to get out of there, right? If they can find the location of the survivors, all the better. If they can get the survivors brought into the room, even better. And then, you know, they have to get out. Now, that might be as simple as, once again, if you have a teleporter with the right psi powers, that might be as simple as they wiggle their nose and everybody leaves. You know, that is possible. It's it's kind of hard to predict for that sort of thing. Or it could be a knockdown, drag out, bloody chase fight as they try to make their way back to their craft with the survivors being chased by these horrific aberrants. So the other thing that we want to make sure that we point out in this scene is as they're finding out as much as they can about the settlement, we have the big reveal. The aberrants seen so far are servants, children, and the weak, effectively. So these are basically all they've faced so far have been baby aberrants, for lack of a better word, right? So we reveal the true powers. They are horrifying. And I think we should go for horrifying on like a vaguely cosmic horror inspired fashion, right? So we're looking at like tentacles. We're looking at scales. Very inhuman. Strange smells and noises. So I'm a big fan of trying to incorporate all 5 of your senses in a description wherever you can in an adventure. Smells and sounds are a good way to convey things being not right. Tastes are a good way to convey things being not right. These are the things that we are most likely to, I think, encounter in our daily life that are off. If something smells funny, something tastes funny, those are things we're probably more likely to bump into as we go through our daily lives. So it's something that's easily relatable too. So what do cultist tentacles taste like? I don't know, but we're gonna find out in this. I'm gonna put that note right here. What do the cultists taste like? Cultist tentacles. Let's be specific, as hopefully nobody's eating them. However, maybe the cultists are, somewhat cannibalistic. They have a limited supply of things. I don't know that that's quite where I want to go with it. I would like to figure out some ways that make the cult very clearly irredeemable, clearly on the side of evil, clearly on the side of this is not okay. Cannibalism is one way to do that, but it's also kind of a it's kind of a cheap shot, I guess. It's feels a little too on the nose and a little too easy. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it does make for a good metal band name, that's for sure. I'm also trying to make sure that my I don't get too much of my like cannibalistic redneck horror chocolate in my cosmic horror peanut butter. I have a fondness for movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Hills Have Eyes, things like that, and I don't want. I mean, though I guess The Hills Have Eyes on an Asteroid is a pretty good X meets Y pitch. You know, uh, maybe yeah, we'll see. I'll keep that in the back of my head. But the point being, though, is as we get to scene 4, there's the intrigue scene where the players are trying to get as much information as they can. They're trying to find out the fate of the survivors, and they're trying to find out what triggered the attack. Get as much backstory as they can. This is a good chance to interact with the intrigue scene, rules, and then hopefully for the players to learn some neat stuff. There will come a point, given the fact that they're in this opposition, where the true powers are revealed. The mighty aberrants behind this cult. Perhaps even these are aberrants that have been here and are still alive from the Exodus, from the time that the aberrants left Earth. In fact, it's probably pretty likely that these are aberrants dating back that far. So we really want to make those sort of what I like to affectionately refer to as pants shitters. We want to make them that you see them and you're like, we must go now. It's time to go. So we'll get to those when we design that. But I think we've got that covered. So they have to, get themselves, get any survivors out safely. Got it all covered. Bam, done. Sweet. All right. So scene 5 is going to be our denouement. We're going to go ahead and write out the scene under the assumption that the party escapes. There's obviously the possibility that they all get eaten by aberrants. See, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I do want to cross those streams a little bit. I don't know that I want to work clowns in. Maybe clowns. Maybe they'll look vaguely clowny. But that also gets, and I understand there's the appeal of killer clowns from outer space, don't get me wrong. But then there's also like the juggalo implications, and I don't know that I want to deal with that because I've had enough of that in Scarred Lands. Scene 4, they're finding out about the cult. We meet the big bads. Scene 5, either they make it out, right, and they escape, or they're dead. So we don't have to really write out they're dead. That we can just kind of explain in the consequences of scene 4, right? Like if things go really sideways, sorry about your character. Though also in Trinity, death is kind of a thing the players need to opt into. So there's always kind of a way out. Maybe they're left on the verge of death and wake up and the station's abandoned. We can write in a couple of options there. But the scene we actually want to write is the scene we actually want to have happen, which is, of course, they escape, and what do we deal with? So we want to cover possibilities. Oh, we don't want to write it in paragraph style 3, though. So possibilities of post-escape action. So they might, what are some things they might do? They might reach out. Maybe they reach out for rescue. Maybe they need to repair the ship. That could be fun. Working on a little bit of the crafting, repair rules, some milestones, ticking clock. So maybe they decide they're going to, instead of reaching out for help, they're going to get back there and they're going to fix their ship well enough to get the hell off the asteroid before it's a problem, right? So they would have to get so many milestones on their repair rolls before the aberrants show up. That could be a cool scene. It's a nice little way to inject a little bit more tension into the moment, while still buttoning things up and keeping things moving. And so if we do have that element where, like, okay, you got to repair the ship, you got to roll against the clock. No matter how well they do, narratively, they get on that ship and break out the second, at the last second, or they don't get away and they have another fight. So we got reaching out for rescue, repairing the ship. Probably contact, if applicable, contact the org that sent them. Right? Because if they work for ICE, they're probably going to want to call their boss. If they are there as part of like a Aeon, sort of technical team, like an evaluation team, they're going to want to call their boss and tell them what happened, right? Obviously, if they're space pirates, they probably don't have a boss to call, but you never know. They might. Or maybe it's even just warning the other members of their clique or other people within their organization. Don't go near Nemesis; it's a bad place. So that might be that might be it. And then our final stage, of course, is Prophet. So there we've kind of broken down the basics of our story. All this is going to need to be fleshed out, and it's going to need to be fleshed out, obviously, in a span of time that is not going to suit itself well for during a live stream. But I think we have some glorious ideas in here, and I think I would like to extend my thanks to all of you who have participated in so far to help get the seeds planted for those ideas. I'm gonna get some water. You should too if you've been watching this and haven't drank. It's like 100. Excuse me. It's like 110 degrees here right now, and while I have some lovely air conditioning, I'm still getting pretty thirsty. I'm also talking my fool head off, to be fair. So now that we have our really, really, really basic plot structure, we know we're going to need a couple of antagonists, a couple of story guide characters based on being bad. So we're going to look at sort of the suggestions in Trinity Continuum and for what we're looking at for dice pools, enhancements, qualities, things along those lines, right? So we're going to have I think we're going to do a series here. We're going to have our Aberrant Cultist. And one thing that's nice about having Aberrant Cultists too is that we can pepper them in anywhere that any of the other aberrants are as additional cannon fodder, right? So maybe when they're fighting divergents coming in the front of the settlement, they also have a couple aberrant cultists with them. So these are going to be sub-aberrant mutants. Then we're going to have like a cult leader, right? And they're going to be advanced mutants. So they're also going to be sub-aberrant mutants, but they're going to be higher up the evolutionary chain a bit. A little bit better at what they do, a little bit tougher. And these are set at roughly the same power level as a divergent. We might ratchet that down. Let's make them between standard mutants and divergence. Okay. Yeah, it is pretty warm. We've been having some heat waves. Not a fan. It would be nice if the billionaires would stop trying to cook us off the planet. That would be sweet. So again, referencing back to Aeon, you've got the sub-aberrant mutant, divergent, nemesis, and terrat aberrant types. And these are all templates that come with various things. So if you note on this sheet, I've sort of pre-filled in before we started. You got some lorem ipsum text at the bottom. This is just sort of Latin nonsense text to figure out roughly how many words and characters are being taken up in the space. But these important parts that are in English are the template. So this is the sub-aberrant mutant template, pretty much copied over from Aeon. This is the divergent template, pretty much copied over from Aeon. I would like to make sure that we get an additional layer in, sort of like, so we've got that sub layer between divergent and I'm gonna call them an advanced mutant, I guess. and then we've got our full line divergent. So in that case, I'm going to take this square here, just moving some things around. Forgive me. Just making a little bit more room in our antagonists, right? Because I've also got some other pre-placed pictures here. So, in fact, we're going to do these two. Move you over here. And move you right here. And again, this is one of the reasons why I like to do some of this construction in InDesign, because it lets me have a very clear view of what I need to do, right? I can clearly see with what I'm doing here that I needed to move some stuff around. So we're going to take, this is our Terrat level template. I'm going to pop that right here under this guy because he's really scary looking. Look at that scary face, or scary non-face. So that's going to be our big bad. This is going to be our theoretically our nemesis level antagonist is going to be the spider-faced filler. And then this is going to be another, so we have our mutant plus, and then we're going to take the divergent and pop that in here. So now these are our templates. This is what's up. As we really would like to kind of focus on the horror, I'm going to make a couple of basic assumption changes to the templates. We're going to ratchet up the power a little bit, make them a little bit scarier. Also, you'll note I have fancy person in medical gear here as an NPC. Once we get all the aberrants squared away, I will probably put some effort into a couple of other NPCs, people that were on the station. Obviously, having a medical, like a Rex medical officer, or a Asclepian medical officer would make sense. Someone who's very kinetic, able to psionically heal damage. Having someone like that on your station would be a boon, and I would think ICE would pay the good money for that. So that's the one kind of human story guide character I have in mind that's connected to ICE so far. But so we've got our aberrant cultists. For them, I don't think we need to make a whole lot of tweaks. I think we need to keep them sort of close to the stock breakdown of things. So just bring that up a little bit closer so we can kind of all see what we're doing. So the way antagonist pools are broken out in Trinity, you have your primary pool, which is the actions that you are going to be rolling. Like that's going to happen at some point if you showed up. Your secondary pool are other things that you're good at, but you might not necessarily need to roll every time. Desperation pool is literally everything else. Comes from the desperation pool. You have a health trait. It's how many wounds you can ultimately suffer. Defense score, which is basically the difficulty to hit you. Your initiative, which is based on one of your pools, depending on what you have those pools described as. It will determine which pool uses your initiative. They have a corruption score of 1, which is how they manage their powers, kind of their source if you're used to other Trinity games. And extras, things that they get in addition to those basic traits. So these aberrant cultists, I'm going to assume that their best skills are probably going to be extraplanetary survival, as they've been doing that for a long time. And probably I would say we'll give them some, how do we want to phrase this? I think we should phrase it as resisting influence. Resisting outside influence. We'll just put resisting influence. Yeah. They're, I think they're going to be surprisingly adept at resisting influence that does not come from above. You see what I'm saying? That doesn't come from the aberrants. That doesn't come from their social structures. They're bought in. They believe in what they're doing. So they're going to be very hard to talk out of what they're doing. Their secondary pools, after all, let's be honest, what are we here for? They're going to be for combat and stealth. So they can be kind of sneaky and they can be kind of dangerous in a fight, but those are not their primary. I cannot type today. They're not their primary functions. So that leaves their desperation pool at 3. Health is fine. We don't need to touch it. Defense, I would say, will actually go off of the same pool as combat. So let's call it a 5. Or I'm sorry, defense stays the same. Initiative goes off of the same pool as combat. So let's call it a 5. And they get a +1 enhancement to one type of action. So we'll call that in close combat due to knives. Sure, why not? And they get 1 to 2 qualities. Qualities are things that are presented in Aeon as a nice way to sort of offer simple powers to antagonists. They are very similar to anomaly powers in the core book. Cover basically the same ground. Qualities are powerful abilities, but they're not quite as powerful as mutations, which are the things that you start getting into once you get into aberrant levels of power. So many of these qualities have prerequisites on it in terms of what level the template has to be, which is part of the reason why we're making sure we have those marked down. So the sub-aberrant mutants can only take qualities that fit within that they fit the prerequisites for. So they basically have no template-based prerequisites. There are a few of those. There's unseen, which lets you effectively become invisible. I don't think we want that for our cultists. That doesn't seem their speed. Swarm is the ability to operate as an organized and coordinated swarm. This quality is typically assigned to several antagonists at once. When doing so, select an aberrant with a divergent or higher archetype as the leader. If the leader is removed, remove this trait from all their aberrants under its command. But while they're within the swarm, they get a bonus to defense and enhancement to combat skill when 2 or more antagonists within the swarm attack a single target during the same turn. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to hand that nifty little swarm quality to our sub-aberrant mutant buddies, because that sounds good. Sounds like something a bunch of cultists would have, right? They can kind of hoard up, act as one big horde. So they will be, and that's I'm just marking down the page number so I can come back in and enter it. And one thing that I do like to do when you're creating community content, you have a certain amount of liberty to work within the IP of the program that you're using, right? So if you're Storypath Nexus, you're talking and Trinity Core, Aberrant. Eventually, soon they will be unlocking other settings. If you're talking about Scion, it's any of the Scion books that are out. You can refer to those. You can refer to the systems in those. You can't just copy and paste walls of text out of them. But one thing that I like to try to do when I'm doing community content, whenever I'm building an antagonist or a story guide character, I like to put like a little truncated explanation of what that thing does and then link the page number or type out the page number and the book that it's drawn from if it's something that already exists. That way, at a glance, the story guide can see basically what it does, but if they need to know the nitty gritty of the mechanics, and as well as the flavor text, which I would never bring over, then they can look at the actual book and see kind of where that works. Make sense? It's just a nice way to honor the spirit and letter of the content guidelines while still keeping it useful for your story guides. So, because we want them to be a little bit on the tougher side, we're going to go ahead and give them a second quality. They've got Swarm. Let's see what else we can get with no prereqs. Flight, I don't think so. It doesn't seem accurate. Doesn't seem like what we're looking for. I do like the idea of Baleful Touch, which is like the ability to sort of wound people with a simple touch. I don't know if I want to give that to a group. One thing we could give them. Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate that, Blink. Thanks. I'm just trying to think this over. I think maybe for the base cultists, we can give them. I'm torn between armor, just making them a little bit tougher, and Baleful Touch, which makes them effectively have like a corrosive ability to deal additional damage with hand-to-hand combat. The effect lingers, close catch on fire, acid clings, so on and so forth. If the target does not use an action on their next turn to deal with the effects. I do like the idea of them all having sort of like a infectious or burning touch. Now that I look at that and think about it a little bit, so yeah, that's cool. We'll add Baleful Touch to their sort of list of party favors here. So we got Baleful Touch and Swarm. Baleful Touch hails from page 333 of Aberrant, or of Aeon, so we're going to toss that on there. Also, a little tip and something I'll probably dive into as I refine these characters as well, these story guide characters. Because the continuum is all intended to sort of work along, they're all intended to work together. They're all intended to be part of the same world. Each of them has antagonist rules which are tuned to the specifics of that setting. So one thing that you might find some utility in, because the antagonist rules work a little bit differently than the rules as presented for a player character, one place where you can sort of mine for cool new things to add in would be like if you're looking for aberrant qualities and mutations, you can look at the aberrant powers and the aberrant mega edges and the mega attributes and say, okay, what out of these qualities is not explicitly covered in the qualities that is provided in Aeon, or what can I repurpose as a quality, and how would I convert that over and provide it in the terms that Aeon is using, right? Because again, it functions differently. It serves a different narrative purpose as an antagonist's quality as opposed to as a player character ability. So that's fertile ground, I guess, is what I'm driving at. It's fertile ground to pull inspiration and ideas from. So we've got our aberrant cultists laid out, pretty simple. Baleful Touch and Swarm. I like it. The cult leader is going to be an aberrant cultist, but we're going to step everything up. So if you look at the Divergent template, it basically already has a slightly higher primary, slightly higher secondary, slightly higher desperation pool. Health goes up, defense goes up. Initiative we will draw in the same fashion. And we're going to keep the corruption at 1 because, if I'm not mistaken, that's as high as a sub-aberrant mutant's corruption can go. I'll have to double check that. They might be able to get a little higher, like in the official rules. I did put out a booklet that gives you the opportunity to play sub-aberrant mutants. Let me dig that up real quick for you. Called Corrupted, which was a lot of fun to build. I just gotta find it now, find the link. But I don't think I want to get too far into the weeds, like making the corrupted rules are like a player template, and I don't think I want to get too far into that for these story guide characters. But I've thrown the link to Corrupted in the chat in case you wanted to check that out. It's a fun little template for playing sub-aberrant mutants. So let's see. We've got all those covered up. We're going to drop our corruption down to 1. I may come back and revisit that later. If we can bring it up to 2 officially, I might do so. And we'll pull out their scale. They're not going to have any scale. Scale is a way for to represent basically much larger than life capabilities. The difference, the difference between like a super powered, Dr. Manhattan level character and just a Moe on the street is represented by scale. They're such orders of magnitude different that they're not even on the same playing field. Scale, in short, covers that. So we're not going to have any scale for our cult leader, but we will add the basic enhancement. We're going to stick with the extras as recommended for the sub-aberrant mutants, where we just are going to give them areas of expertise. The sub-aberrant mutant base core is +1 enhancement to 1 thing. So for the leader, we're going to go +2 enhancement for 2 things. And we're going to add that to, we're going to say close combat. And we're going to also add that to intrigue. They're good talkers, good leaders, things like that. Also, that'll make the useful as they come up as the antagonists in the intrigue section. So we've got our enhancements there. We're looking at 2 to 3 qualities, which I love. And the Divergent template calls for 1 to 2 mutations, but these are not actual aberrants, so they don't have mutations. All right, so now we've got 2 to 3 qualities to pick out. Swarm is a no-brainer. We want the leader to have the swarm quality. We are bending the rules a bit, and we need to make a note of that. As written, the swarm quality requires a divergent level aberrant or higher to control the minions, as it were. We're going to go ahead and discard that because it doesn't work with what we want to do. And you can do that. It's fine. You can just chuck a rule out the window. Best thing to do when you do that, though, is make sure you make a note of it, which is why I've made a note to make a note. As I do the final description, I'll explain that the swarm quality normally requires a divergent leader, but because of whatever hand wavy I might decide, because this group has lived together in an extra terrestrial colony for 2 generations, whatever reason I come up with, the swarm works for them as well. If a rule doesn't work for you, find a plausible way to get around it and get around it. That's my little piece of game design information for you today. Write an exception if one does not provide itself for you. So we have two more qualities to give this fella. Now I don't necessarily want them to have baleful touch. Maybe they should have the ability to fire a blast, right? So instead of um, having to reach out and place hands on someone, they can make their displeasure known with bursts of radiation from their eyes. So let's add a blast to that. That's going to be fun. That's going to give us actually, and let's change our enhancement then to ranged combat. They're not up close fighters. They are fighting at a distance, and that includes their blast. So blast is going to go over to also, I believe, on page 333 of Anne. Forgive me as I sift through and make sure I'm just writing my notes properly. Yep. So they got their blast, they got their swarm ability. And then let's just go ahead and give them some armor too, just to make things nice for them. Give them a little bit higher chance at survival. So they're a little bit more of a pain in the neck for our intrepid adventurers. And again, I'll go back and clean all this up when we're done. We're going to say for our primary pools, we're going to have intrigue and ranged combat. Our secondary pool is going to be resisting outside influence and stealth. And so since our fight is going to be 8, we're going to give them initiative equal to that pool. There we go. All right. The mechanics for the cult leader and the cultists are done. Now we're getting into our fun stuff. So this is going to be our divergent template. Normally I would work from piece of art backwards, but we're going to assume that our divergence, they're going to be the first actual aberrants that our people are going to come across. So we want them to be terrifying in some way or fashion. Some sort of like mutated, horrific appearance to them. And they're going to be throwing basically the same dice around as the cult leader, but they will have the power scale. And scale is broken out into different types that all achieve different things. Power scale is how you do damage to people and buildings and things along those lines. It's how you break stuff in folk. So if you want to break someone, the power scale applies. The divergent aberrants have a little bit of it. That comes in handy. So we're going to make these definitely fighters. So their primary pool is going to be close combat. And we'll say tracking. So they're fighters and hunters. Their secondary pools are going to be stealth and intimidation. I recommend too, just for no other reason than cleanliness and clarity of presentation. Put your things in alphabetical order when you list them. I think that helps people process them better. It also makes it easier to find what you're looking for. So Desperation Pool is 4, Health is 5, Defense is 4. That's all fine. Our Close Combat is going to be our initiative, so let's drop that to 8. Corruption, let's give them a 3. I want my antagonists to have power and be scary. So Corruption 3, they get a +2 enhancement for stunts other than inflict damage. That's across the board for Divergent Aberrants. They all get it. Easy peasy. We don't have to change that. So we have 2 to 3 qualities. Let's say 3. And 1 to 2 mutations. Let's say 2. Again, let's stack the deck at the top of the deck. The top of the expectation. We can always dial it back later. If you're doing something along the lines of like playtesting or something like that, and you find that, I made all these things too powerful and they're walking through my players, then dial it back. But I can tell you from experience designing antagonists for Trinity, you're probably not going to make it too hard on your players. Their players are resilient and the system favors them, so feel free to give them a challenge or two. I'm just looking through a couple of other things to see if we have any good ideas or inspirations here. But let's do our mutations first and work our way backwards. Mutations, qualities are things that the aberrant just has and they can just do. Mutations, on the other hand, tend to come from more direct expenditures of corruption. Sub-aberrant mutants can never possess them. They're a more potent manifestation of corruption. Let's see. I like the idea of the babies being a little bit more physical, a little bit more in throwing down. So I think one thing that'll be nice for them is let's give them Quantum Wave. Quantum Wave is a mutation that allows aberrants to basically send out a wave of energy that heals their allies. It's a nice rallying sort of action. When invoked, all allied characters within long range temporarily remove 1 injury condition or gain a blanket +1 enhancement to all actions if they don't have one. The injury conditions return and the enhancement fades when the mutation ends, which basically means the end of the scene, or when the subjects move out of range of the antagonist, or if the antagonist is taken out. So we're going to hand Quantum Wave to our Divergents. They're all going to be able to hand out a little bit of buffing to their buddies, and that's on let's see, that is on page 336 of Aeon. And we got one more mutation to grab. Looking at some ideas. Like I said, I do want them to be sort of scrappers. I want them to be physical. And let's go with, I got one. Let's go with Incapacitate. This is a cool little mutation. Doesn't actually cost anything. Quantum Wave costs 1 corruption to use. Incapacitate doesn't cost anything. And it allows the aberrant to make an attack, and if successful, the attack deals no damage, but the target is taken out immediately, knocked unconscious. So I think that's a good way to sort of ratchet up the horror for the player characters, although they'll know mechanically that their character is basically fine. Having them get dropped in one shot is a good way to make everybody a little bit more scared. So let's throw incapacitate in there. And of course, if someone is incapacitated through the use of this mutation, their buddies can wake them up. It just takes an action to do so, and they're not harmed in any other way. But again, ratchet up the terror, and also it's a little bit of battlefield control, right? Let's say, if they're fighting these divergence one-on-one, and this is another place where as you design you might want to come back and look back at what you're doing. If they're fighting these divergence even force 1-to-1 and each divergent hits a player character with incapacitate, that's the end of the scene. They're done. They get out of there. So maybe as we're refining this and going back through, instead of having, when they face the guards, instead of having one for each member of the party, maybe we have the opponents be like number of party members -1 or -2, just to keep things interesting, rather than have it just be like a guaranteed knockout in the first round. Yes, absolutely. Messing with the action economy is a great way to get an interesting combat. Anything that you can do that can um, interrupt the flow of a player's plan, right? Although it's not always the case, you will often find that your players will know their characters, they'll know their things, they'll have a couple of pet ideas they want to try, and they'll be looking for opportunities to drop those. And the longer they play the characters, the more that's likely to be true. Not always the case, but often. So if you can throw like a wrench in that particular set of works, in a good way, in a fun way, in a way that makes them be challenged, I think that can be a lot of fun for their experience. And also, just putting it out there with the incapacitate mutation, waking somebody up from it can be done as part of like a mixed action. So you're not even like denying them an action so much as really you're sort of complicating their existing action. And all of Trinity Continuum is much more fun when you throw in complication. That's why it's a mechanic. So yeah, I think that is sufficient for our mutations. We've got incapacitate and quantum wave. And 3 qualities. Let's see. What do we want to do for our qualities? Again, we want to focus on everything. It helps when you have like a concept, right? So, and tying everything together to that concept. My idea for these is that they are ultimately like big, scary monsters that can just beat the snot out of you. But they can also maybe squeal in such a fashion that squeal acts as like a rallying cry to the rest of them, right? So I'm thinking very sort of xenomorph-ish kind of inspirations, everything being physical, up close, up in your face. So I like the idea of, this is a place where unseen might be cool, because I like the idea of few things are scarier than something that you can't see, you can't hear, you can't touch, but you know is there. So yeah, let's give them unseen, make people's days a little harder. Also fits with their picture right now. Isn't that funny? It's like rain on your wedding day. Um, so we're gonna give them, yeah, unseen. And I'm going to go ahead and make a note. Since I've got it in front of me, I'm going to look at what the unseen quality offers. Gives +3 defense and 3 enhancement to stealth. Okay. So I'm going to make those notes in here. And we're going to kick that defense up to a 7. And I'm going to note not only the page number, which is 335, but I'm also going to note in here that bonuses already worked into traits. And that note is for me. You may have noticed by now I'm kind of hopping around idea to idea. Part of the reason that I'm doing that, part of the reason I've gone section to section, and the reason I've done this the way I've done it, is to try to give you kind of the real basic overview. The rest of it is all dialing in the specifics, polishing the text, making sure that it's functional. So as you're doing that, when you're bouncing around thing to thing, it doesn't hurt to like make little notes for yourself in there. If you add the traits from a power into the base traits, make sure you make a little note of that so that you're not looking at it later and being confused and trying to figure out why your divergent has a defensive 7, right? So having those little notes can save you a lot of time later on your cleanup pass. And I do deeply apologize to anybody who my chaotic means of creating these things throws. But it's just I work how I work. So we got 2 more qualities, and we're going to bang out those 2 qualities, and then I think that's where we're going to wrap up stream. I didn't realize quite how late it had gotten, but we don't have anybody immediately after us, so I can go a little bit longer till we get this finished up anyway. So we have unseen. And again, we're limited by the divergent archetype or better. So let's do... I like the idea of multitasking, perhaps. Like it's got multiple arms. That's cool, but it'd be a lot cooler on a character that they could see. So let's skip that for now. How about... let's make their damage armor piercing. I think that's a good quality. Oh, thanks, Blank. I'm glad that it's helpful for you. My hope is that it is that A, we get to make some cool stuff and have some fun talking about it, but B, that it might act as an inspiration or as a offer some nuggets of wisdom and hopefully get more people putting stuff up on the Storypath Nexus. That is the reason for the season. I really do think it's a good, fun program. I think it gives access to some really cool stuff to create with, and I would love to see more people doing books for it. It fills out a very cool niche in that it allows you to create material that players would want, but like the officially is very difficult to justify putting out. Little small one-shot adventures are extremely cool, but Onyx Path only has so much budget to put out so many tasty bits. You know what I mean? And they have to spread it over all of the lines that they're running. So that means that there's an opportunity for the community to step up and say, "Oh, well, I'm going to make 10 adventures. I'm going to price them for $2 a pop. You make a little bit of money. The community gets more usable material. It's a win-win for everybody. There's really no reason not to do it. So I really recommend checking it out and looking at making some stuff. All right, so we have one more quality. We got the armor piercing. We've got the unseen. Now, I don't necessarily know that I want to give anything like special attack wise. I don't know that I want to give them blast or baleful touch. As a matter of fact, I think maybe they should just they have the power scale, they have hands, and they hurt. And they're able to pierce armor. So basically, they get to ignore soft armor when they're dealing inflict damage. So that's cool. So I think we'll just drop them armor as well. And with the armor tag, they get 2 points of soft armor and additional points of tags equal to 2 plus the aberrant's corruption. So I'm going to design the armor for the 2 people that we have that trait on right now, and then we'll wrap things up. Sound good to everybody? I hope so. All right. So, and I'm going to just note right now that those bonuses are already worked into traits. So don't forget to note it when I'm done. I'm going to put the unseen actually inside the parentheses it refers to and delete that. Yes? No? Yep. Okay. So, yeah, I'm glad to see you're checking out the Nexus. And even if you don't want to make anything for the Nexus, looking at it for stuff to pick up is a great way to like expand your Trinity Continuum, or whatever game you're playing. If you're playing Scion, that's fine too. That they came from, there's stuff up there for Dystopia Rising. Whatever game you're playing, there's going to be some material in there that I think is going to help your game out. So when aberrants have the armor quality, they get 2 points of soft armor. For antagonists, that just means it increases their defense. So now we're looking at a defense of 9. And then if they were to run across a effect that reduced their soft armor, it would reduce that first. But that's neither here nor there. And the additional points of tags equal to 2 plus the aberrant's corruption. Our aberrant corruption is 3, so we have 5 points in armor tags we can apply. So we're looking at, let's do complete for 3, which makes it against all types of damage. So just gonna put the tags in here. Yeah, complete 3. And then we have composite, which we don't need if we have complete. Concealable, which we don't necessarily need because they're invisible. Defensive. Let's see what defensive does. I'm not familiar with that tag off the top of my head. Armor with this tag is covered in spikes, spines, or another covering damaging to attackers. Anyone without armor successfully attacks the wearer with an unarmed attack automatically suffers 1 injury condition. That sounds aberranty. Yeah, let's add defensive 2 to our armor. Excellent. All right, so that's done. We've got the armor for our divergent together, and one more little piece of armor to do, and then we're going to call it a day. So our cult leader also has the armor. We're going to work those traits in. So we're going to make a note of that, so we don't forget later. So again, our armor offers a base of 2 points of soft armor. And then we get 2 plus the aberrance, corruption, and tag. So it's 3 points tags. If we had defensive, so then we get 1 more point of tag. So actually what we'll do is we'll just make this straight up composite and call it a day, because that will make everybody's life easier. So we got defense goes up to 6. And the armor is composite. That way it can address all 3 types of damage that you can experience, which is basically ballistic, impact, and slashing, I believe. Double check that I got those names right. Ballistic, blunt, and edged. Yeah. So composite armor is protective against all 3. So here we are. We're 2 hours in. I think we're probably going to wrap things up there. We have gone through. We've come up with our basic premise for Assault on Nemesis Station. We have our scenes roughed out. What we're going to do with our scenes is roughly covered. So I will go through sometime during all the copious amounts of free time I keep laying around this next week and flesh those out into full scenes. We have our stats for the first sort of 3 phases of our antagonists, which is handy. And yeah, just enough to make us dangerous. Depending on how things go, I have a lot of stuff going on this week. So depending on how things go, I may come back next week and do a little bit more on this, or I may work on another project if this is done. But I think we will dive into this maybe again next week. In the interim, I just want to once again thank you all for being here, for checking the place out. If you've not yet done so, please be sure to follow and subscribe. Definitely head over to Storypath Nexus and pick up some content by the various wonderful creators there. Not just myself. There's a ton of people that put stuff up there that's really cool. So definitely check that out and spread the word. And I appreciate your presence. My name is Travis. My pronouns are he and they. When I'm not running games, I'm writing them. You can find me pretty much everywhere online at Travis Legge. I'm even on Blue Sky now. Woohoo! So check out the things I got going on out there. I got a lot of stuff going on this month, so definitely make sure to poke your head into my social media. And yeah, keep an eye on the Monday meeting notes. Our next Kickstarter is going to be Titans Rising for Scion. That's exciting. We should have some cool Titan-focused content coming for you here on the Twitch soon. And yeah, thank you all for being here. Until we meet again, take care of yourselves and each other, and wash your hands, get your shots, all that fun stuff. See you again real soon. Bye.